I give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. On indulgence, I wish to acknowledge and pay tribute to the death of Mikhail Gorbachev. Striding warmly into the chill of the Cold War, Mikhail Gorbachev helped set history on what was, for a while at least, such a hopeful new course. Behind his fresh face was a radically open mind, one brimming with ideas that extended far beyond simply maintaining what was an increasingly sclerotic status quo. He was a communist that even Margaret Thatcher was able to take a shine to. Bob Hawke described his own 2.5-hour one-on-one meeting with Gorbachev in the Kremlin as one of the most compelling of his prime ministership. It was an extraordinary time. As the leader of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev brought openness to a closed society with his policy of glasnost. Dissidents were freed, as were many banned books and films. As some of the darker truths of Soviet history were confronted, journalists began to report more honestly on the present. With perestroika, he tried to restructure a system deeply resistant to any such attempts. The nations of Eastern Europe had their sovereignty restored, freed from Soviet hegemony. Working together with President Ronald Reagan, he achieved breakthroughs in arms control, including for some nuclear weapons. But while he was a man of great vision, his foresight was patchier. He did not always predict the seismic consequences of his reforms, nor did he imagine that they would precipitate the very end of the USSR. As he dryly noted in his resignation speech, events went a different way. Tragically, the demise of the Soviet Union was not bloodless. On Gorbachev's watch, the military was used to crush dissent, including in Lithuania and Georgia. It is a cruel paradox that during a time of exhilarating new freedoms, people were killed fighting for theirs. But it should also be noted that Gorbachev regularly resisted the urgings from hardline colleagues in the KGB to uphold the Soviet tradition of power through fear and through force. He was a man of principle, hope, resolve and enormous courage, and he did change the world. In a world profoundly divided, he was driven by an instinct for cooperation and unity. Ultimately, he lifted a great shadow that lay over humanity, and he strove to lift other shadows. Indeed, I spent time with him in Brisbane in 2006 when he co-chaired Earth Dialogues, a significant international energy and security conference. He was still very much a towering global figure, but I will always count it as a privilege to have had the chance to engage with such a world figure. Late in life, when asked what his epitaph should be, Gorbachev answered, "We tried." A true giant of the 20th century, he changed the world for the better. May he rest in peace.
I give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister's fine words and honour the life of Mikhail Gorbachev. Unlike other leaders in the Soviet Party who were born before the Russian Revolution, Gorbachev was a child of the Soviet system. His family were peasants and experienced the horrors of the 1930s and 1940s, agricultural collectivisation, Stalin's purges, Nazi invasion and occupation, and of course famine. Like so many of those during Stalin's Great Terror, Gorbachev's grandfathers were arrested on fabricated charges. One was exiled and the other imprisoned for 14 months. Those early experiences naturally shaped the man. Despite these hardships, Gorbachev was a star student and a prolific reader. Testimony to his early leadership potential, he organised sport and social activities and was liked and trusted by his classmates. In his late teens, he spent several summers farming the land with his father, working 20-hour days and operating a mammoth combine harvester. For helping to produce a record harvest in 1948, he was awarded the Order of the Red Banner of Labour. That decoration, combined with his intelligence, saw the unlikely boy rise from a peasant background, walk through the doors of Moscow State University in 1950 to study law. 1 year later, at a dance, he would meet his future wife, Raisa Titarenko, whose family also suffered under Stalin's cruelty. In 1952, motivated by patriotism, future promise and the pressure to conform, Gorbachev joined the Communist Party as many others had done. Upon graduating from university in 1955, he returned to his native region in the city of Stavropol. He took up his first political job in the Communist Party's youth organisation. His career would see him rise through the party's ranks, first from first secretary of the Stavropol Regional Committee in 1970 to a secretary of the Central Committee in 1978 to appointment to the Politburo in 1980 and finally to General Secretary in 1985, the last leader of the Soviet Union. By the time Gorbachev was in the top job, the horrors, oppression and demoralisation of the Soviet system were of course known beyond the Iron Curtain with the publishing of Gulag Archipelago. Then in 1986, those realities were amplified as news spread of the Chernobyl disaster. With the corrupt Soviet system already cracking, Gorbachev set out to reform it through the policies of restructuring and openness, particularly through perestroika and glasnost. Indeed, it was Gorbachev's openness which saw him cultivate warm relations with President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher to tear down a wall and to do business. Gorbachev wanted the socialist system to live up to its original ideals. Historian Archie Brown described him as a pragmatist with an extraordinary capacity for learning and adjustment, a vanguard of reform and the guarantor of its continuity. Gorbachev's endeavours to democratise Soviet socialism, to weaken the state, to strengthen the individual, inevitably saw the system collapse. Biographer William Taubman said that Gorbachev made it to the top by seeming to be an ideal product of the Soviet system, but masterfully consolidated power to transform it. He went on to say he dismantled an empire or acquiesced in its dismemberment without the orgy of blood and violence that has accompanied the breakup of so many others. For that achievement, Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990, 24 years after he resigned as the leader of the Soviet Union and after the dissolution of the USSR. Gorbachev wrote, and I quote, "An optimist is someone dissatisfied with the existing state of affairs who is not resigned to it and constantly looks for opportunities to make the world a better place. I declare myself an optimist." Today, the world remains optimistic that Russia's future will have more Gorbachevs and fewer Putins. On behalf of the opposition and on behalf of the coalition, I offer my heartfelt condolences to Ms Gorbachev's daughter, Irina, and his family. May he rest in peace.
As a mark of respect, I invite all present to rise in their places. I thank the House. And of course,